Ah, I see you made it. On behalf of our small group, I'd like to welcome our new friend. Here in the seclusion of the Everfree Forest, we'd like to share with you the tales of the uncanny, of the unseen. Tales befitting this special occasion. So sit back and listen to what we tell you. Images of sorrow, pictures of delight, as submitted for the approval of the Nightmare Night Society.
There was a griffin in the woods, who, after a long day of travel, found himself in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and the trees were too thick for him to fly out. Having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. No one was inside. The griffin lied down on the single bed, deciding to explain to himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around the inside of the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable, making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces. He turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the griffin awoke. He turned, blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows.
A mother and father decided they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted foal-sitter. When the babysitter arrived, the two children were already fast asleep in bed. So, the foal-sitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the parents called the foal-sitter to ask if everything is fine. After answering the parents that their kids are safe and sound, the foal-sitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the angel statue outside, facing the bedroom window, with a blanket or cloth, because it made her feel uncomfortable. The phone line went silent for a moment, and then a cold shiver ran down the foal-sitter's spine. We don't own an angel statue.
One time I stayed at a hotel. Like always, I checked in and was given my keys. But on the way up to my room, I passed a room door with no number on it. During the stay, I never saw or heard any pony walk in and out of the room, which piqued my curiosity. One night, while walking down the hall, I stopped at the unmarked room and tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. I hesitated for a second before I bent down and looked through the wide keyhole. Cold air passed through it. It chilled my eye. What I saw was a hotel bedroom, just like my own. However, in the corner was a mare, whose coat was incredibly pale shade of white. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. All of a sudden, the mare turned sharply and caused me to jump back from the door. Hoping she would not expect I'd been spying on her, I crept away from the door and walked back to my room. The next day I asked the receptionist who lived in the room. However, all I was told is that it was merely a storeroom, and I shouldn't go near it under any circumstance. This confused me since I clearly saw it was a room with a person inside. Later that night, I couldn't help my curiosity and looked through the wide keyhole one more time. This time all I saw was redness. I couldn't make anything out besides the distinct red, unmoving color. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room noticed some pony spying the night before and blocked the keyhole with something red. I felt embarrassed, making whoever's life in the room uncomfortable, and hoped she had not made a complaint with the receptionist. The next day I came to apologize, but after hearing that I'd looked through the hole, the receptionist sighed and decided to tell me the whole story. Long ago, a mare died in that room. Since then, some ponies get uncomfortable or anxious when near it. She was quite extraordinary. Her coat was white all over. Her eyes were a deep shade of red.
Like every night, I went to my son's bedroom to tuck him in before sleep. That night, he asked me to look under his bed, if there's anything under it. I smiled and looked down. What I saw was my son. With a terrified look on his face, he whispered, "Daddy, there's something on my bed."
If you're even near Trottingham, you may hear an old mare's tale about a place unlike any other in Equestria. They say deep in the countryside, there is a small village that time has forgotten. No pony has lived there in over 200 years. It won't be on any map, any road sign as no roads lead to it, and it can't even be found when flying in the air. Time and indeed every pony has forgotten about this place. If you do wish to visit it, you will need to travel there by hoof. The walk will be long, and towards the end, you will have to pass through a huge forest. This forest is dark, and most who enter it will never be seen again. If you do make it through the forest alive, it will be waiting. When you come out of the forest, you will be outside the village. It will literally be like stepping 200 years into the past. Make your way through the village, but do not stop. You are being watched. In the very center of the village stands a well. It just stands there, unremarkable, deep enough to make it hard to see to the bottom. Once there, you will throw into it a 1 Bitcoin, a 2 Bitcoin, a 5 Bitcoin, and finally a 10 Bitcoin. After that, you will then put a gem in it. This is said to grant you wealth beyond any pony. If you put in a tear, you will be granted love and happiness. Put a strand of hair or a feather, and you become wise and strong. However, if you stand at the wishing well for a few minutes, a large, dark, undescribable figure will be standing behind you. He will offer you his hand. Fear will kick in, and you will want to run. But do not run. Some say that if you take his hand, you will feel a surge of power rush through your body. A power unlike any unicorn or alicorn. will enter your body that very second in a flash, but it will cause you to pass out. When you awaken, the figure will no longer be there, and you'll find yourself outside of the village. When you awaken, 5 minutes later, 2 hours later, 200 years later, would you take his hand?
I believe we have time for one more story. One time a pony found a pile of photographs, similar to the ones in front of you. There's about a dozen of them, am I right? The first photo was that of a dark area in the woods. The second photo showed seemingly the same spot. However, this time you could make out a dark figure blending away in the darkness. The third photo had the same figure standing far enough so it was hard to make out its features. The fourth photo had the figure appear a bit closer, still covered in shadows of the forest. With each photo the figure seemed to come closer and closer, so by the ninth photo its shadow-covered face took most of the picture. The pony had the impression that the figure was looking right at them. By the 11th photo all they could make up was the figure's stare. Shivers ran down the pony's spine, fearing to turn the last photo.